Hello and welcome to the fifth video of our channel, and this is a video on how to multiply integers. So today I'll teach you how to multiply an integer, and pretty much the words or terms you'll learn in this video are, well, actually they're not really terms this time. It's pretty much techniques on how I would do them, or just a pretty good kind of technique that I would use to help you guys to understand this more. So in this video there are two. I use the general technique and pretty much common sense. The two techniques that were listed before pretty much will help you out with, like, let's say, I don't know, you want to know what the product of a number is, if it's going to be positive or negative. So down here you can see the number line. It's the same thing, the same number line I used in the second video. Still not the best, but it works. So anyway, we can just start off with the basics of pretty much multiplying an integer. So one of the easiest one is like basic math, pretty much. Like you probably learned this in, I don't know, grade 4 or something. Sorry, grade 2. Like let's just take 4 times 4. Now 4 times 4, they are integers, just they're positive integers, and obviously the product, oh, by the way, they're factors, sorry, and obviously the product's going to be 16, because that's just pretty much basic math, because you're just having 4 groups of 4. So if you want to draw that out, just little 4 groups. So I don't want to draw all of them out, but pretty much there are 4 groups of those, so which would be 16 if you added them all up in the end. Alright, so a note you could take is whenever two positives are multiplied together, it's always going to equal a positive, and whenever two negatives, so this is quite tricky and quite complicated, but I also kind of have some idea, like 2 negatives, if you take those two, you can make a plus sign, because 1 and then 2, so it's pretty much a little thing that I remember how to do it. So 2 negatives equals a positive, pretty much, so 2 negatives equals a positive. And yeah, so that's how that's a little trick I know to make sure that it's right. So we can have an example, like, we'll just do the exact opposite, and it's going to take the same answer. So, oh, and by the way, you probably saw this in the previous videos, and if they're not explained already, usually you put the negatives in brackets, just so it looks better, and it makes your work look more clean, so your teachers or peers could understand it. So, like, so it wouldn't look like, let's say you had a question like 4 and then -4. It's like, you know how when something's in brackets, it's a multiplication, right? This looks like 4 minus 4, but really you're trying to get at this. So just the teachers will get confused. But let's not get off topic and continue our question. So we'll do the same thing as before, except this time it'll be negatives. So obviously the product, so 4 times 4 would be 16. So again, the product of this number, of these two factors, would be 16. Alright, so now you pretty much understand it. You're like, wow, this is easy, right? It's just when there's two signs are the same thing, it's positive. But now the tricky part is when you have a positive on one side and then a negative on the other side. That's the tricky part about multiplying. So we'll take another example of the 4s. So we'll have oops, oh, sorry, hold on a sec. There you go. -4 -4 times 4. Now this is one of the more trickier questions in multiplying integers, and one of the techniques I would use is a saying. There's 2 phrases in it, and all it is pretty much same sign is a positive, and then different signs are negative. So no, those 2 phrases mean a lot, actually. So right now, this is a negative and this is a positive, so they have different signs, right? So obviously this equation would be negative. But like one of the questions we did before, those ones, the 2 factors of those ones are going to be a positive because they're the same signs, which are positives and negatives. So now if you want to go for a more tricky question, but probably the same thing, you could maybe do -5 times -3. And now how you'd look at this question was, alright, so this side's a negative, that's a bad circle, but then this sign's a negative. So since both those signs are negative, the phrase was same signs is positive. So obviously this number is going to be positive. Then you multiply the two numbers. So 5 times 3 is 15. And since the two signs are the same, it's going to be positive. So which means that the product of these two factors is 15. Alright, so now you're probably thinking, well, this stuff's all easy. I honestly think that too. That's why I use these strategies when there's difficult questions, but also I use common sense. And what I mean by that is I just pretty much go with my instincts or whatever. I don't know how you'd say that, but let's say like you have negative 4 times 4. So what you do is so you start off with negative 4, right? And then you times that by 4. So obviously it's going to be negative because you're taking 4 negative groups and multiplying them again by 4, which means it's going to have more negatives because you're just multiplying it over and over again. So obviously that's going to be negative 16, but it just makes more sense because I don't know if you understand this, but I don't know why I understand this, but it's just something out there that if you understand. So you pretty much have negative 4, and you have 4 groups of the negative 4, so that's going to be negative 16 because you're just adding negative 4 times pretty much. Now if that did sound confusing to you, that's alright. Some people would find that confusing and some people won't, but that's just something that I can put out there. Just if you guys understand, there you go. Alright, so now you pretty much understand how to do it, and if not, I guess just replay, see what you messed up on, or if you're still struggling, just keep on replaying it until you get it right. And so I guess we can start off by going into some of the harder problems, just so it gives you more of an idea on how to do it. Okay, so let's take a question like negative 7 times 4. And also, the number line, I don't find that useful in multiplying. It's kind of hard to use it, but if you had a different question, let's just make that negative 3. You'd go like this. So you go 1, 2, 3. Then since it's times 4, you gotta do that 3 more times. So 1. So that's 2. That's 3. And that's 4. So you'd end up here. I mean, that does work. Don't get me wrong, but it's just easier and more. It's just kind of easier and faster to do it the other way. But if you find that better too, go right ahead. I'm not stopping you. But yeah. Okay, but let's get back to the problem. Anyway, so negative 7 times 4. Alright, so now we can start off by figuring out, since this is a negative, and we'll just put the positive sign in for there, and this one's a positive, they obviously have different signs. Okay, so since they have different signs, you'd have to multiply them, and then the products would be a negative number. So we'd multiply 7 times 4. So 7 times, that's a plus sign, but 7 times 4, which would equal 28. And now, since I said before that those signs are different, it would be a negative number. So negative 28 would be your product. Now also with multiplying, since they are commutative numbers, they can be swapped. So let's just take the example 7 times 4. The same question would also could be 4 times 7, like that. Alright, so that's pretty much it. But the big question is, why would you use this in a real life situation? Well, let's just say you were in the stock market and you invest in, let's say, Apple, and they double in sales. You're going to want to know what the integer is doubled. So let's say they were selling by 1 million or something like that. If you want to double that, you'd have to know how to double that with multiplying. So that would be 2 million. But let's say it had negatives or something like that. You also have to know multiplying to understand if your thing's going well or not so very great. Or let's just say you owe somebody money and they triple it because you haven't. well, then you're gonna have to know multiplying because they're not gonna tell you. Really, you're gonna have to pretty much figure it out. So you'd have to know what the thing was. So it obviously a negative number because you're owing someone money. So you'd have to triple that, and you'd have to know multiplying to triple that number. But that's pretty much it for this video. And if you didn't understand any of that, or you're still struggling with some stuff, just replay the video from the start, and then you'd probably understand if you were struggling at all. So anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the